This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found on Gadget Geek show number 308, recorded on May 4th. Happy Star Wars Day to you, by the way, 2017. Here at Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite technology, news, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the Average Guy TV studios. And finally, a beautiful Nebraska. Mike, the sun came out. We haven't seen the sun here in Omaha.
I was trying to find a day to mow my lawn because it was raining every single day and it was cold and but yeah, today the sun was out and it's gorgeous.
Well, we were talking about that last week of you mowing your lawn, and it's literally rained. It feels like every day.
Every day since then.
No kidding. So we'll have a weekend of mowing to get out to this week. Of course, we host a show with world-class show notes out here at theaverageguy.tv. Don't forget, you can also join us live on our mobile app. Easy to access buttons to get that downloaded. It's free, the app, completely separate app. Best way to listen to Home Gadget Geeks when you're on the road. HomeGadgetGeeks.com. Get you there. We want to thank LastPass for their sponsorship of that. Speaking LastPass, Edward is with us tonight. Edward Weniger is with us, and Edward reminded me today is Password Day, National, International, something Password Day, right?
World Password Day, yep.
World Password Day, right? So a good reminder to think about, one, how many passwords that you have that are the same, how many, how can you remember them, where they're stored, and what Edward, what are some other good things when we think about passwords? What are those other safety things we should?
The big push is for multi-factor authentication, two-factor. So we've in my line of work, we've started pushing that and trying to introduce that more to clients, and they're getting more used to it. So
yeah. Do you have a favorite? I mean, you're in the financial business. Your company, Alpha BTC, is in finance. Do you guys have a favorite two-factor method that you kind of recommend for people?
I think text messages kind of annoy me because there's a delay. I prefer using an app, whether it's Google Authenticator or Duo or something like that. I mean, that's my preference. So yeah. I use LastPass to store my passwords, and I still need to put MFA, somehow introduce that into more of my mix. So.
Yeah, well, I'm finding, I don't know about you, and Mike, you can chime in on this with passwords. I'm using more and more mixed kind of two-factor. So sometimes I go to the authenticator. Sometimes there's an app that does it for me. Okay. Some of those things. Mike, you got a favorite that you're using at this point mostly, or smatter?
It's the one I actually don't like. I need to switch. I'm still using the text message, but it works out okay on the Mac side of things because my texts come in on all my devices. So I don't need to have my phone with me because it'll still show up on my screen. So, but I need to get away from it. I like Google Authenticator. I was using that for a while for TeamViewer, and then I turned off two-factor actually because it got so annoying.
I like one of the best I've seen is like Yahoo, and Microsoft kind of does the same thing, like the push authentication. So it prompts you when you're logging in, so you don't even have to open the app. So
right,
yeah. And LastPass 2 has that authenticator app, which you get a notification. You can go to the app. You've got to log into your phone. You put your fingerprint on it, and then it'll come up with the screen that gives you a minute 40 seconds or something, a minute 30, whatever, to click the check mark, and then boom, you'll automatically authenticate where you're at. So I like that. I do find it's just multi-factor is I have a multi-factor way of multi-factor. It's kind of growing, and I've been thinking about a YubiKey, but I'm restricted at work with USB ports, and so that doesn't really work. I do get like Yahoo and not Yahoo, but Microsoft and Google, I think, are still coming via text to me for the most part. And so it works. And the banks do it differently too. I have a bank app that's got its own fingerprint identification now. I think Bank of the West will authenticate using the Apple, fingerprint reader.
Touch ID.
MasterCard is going that way. From the headline I read, I didn't read the article, but yeah.
Yeah, Touch ID. Thanks, Mike. I couldn't come up with that. So
my bank app uses it too, and I love it. Amex uses it. First National Bank here uses it. I think it's one of the best ways to log into those apps.
Yeah. Well,
so much so I whip out my phone to do that stuff before logging on the computer.
No, that's super convenient, right? I mean, you go in, put your, have it scan, and then go forward. Is that any different on the 7, Mike? The iPhone 7, because you're on a 7 now, right?
Right. The only difference is that home button doesn't push down anymore.
Okay, right.
It's not a physical button. It's like haptic feedback. So sometimes when I'm doing it, I'll end up pressing too hard and it'll go home instead of authenticating. But no, it's no different.
But still scans down there.
Still scans down there.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
So there's this plethora of that, but as we think of May the 4th here being, we started with Star Wars Day. We'll come back to that here in just a second. But of course, it's Password Day. Always good to think about your passwords. We're, of course, big fans of LastPass because they're big fans of the podcast. And Amber's going to come on in here in, I think, July. I've got her lined up now at this point. But we thank LastPass for their sponsorship. And, of course, it's always a good time. I think when you check the smoke detectors, it's a good time to check your passwords, right? That's kind of those two things go hand in hand. Or when you do your taxes or when it's your birthday, there's no bad time. Check your passwords. So speaking of Star Wars Day, let's do a quick little, since we're kind of tech guys, right? And Edward, I don't know this for sure. Are you a Star Wars fan at all? Did you get into that series? Do you like it at all?
I like it. I watched the movies. I had the action figures, but I wouldn't consider myself like a fan.
Not an uber geek fan. What's your favorite of the 7? I guess we could say 8 if we include Rogue One. You got a favorite?
No, don't even have a favorite.
All right, Mike. What about you? You got a favorite one of the 8 that are out?
No, I have more like least favorites. Like there are some where like I didn't like that, but the rest of them are like, oh, they're all pretty good.
So, yeah, there are some that are bad. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yikes! We kind of went off the rails a little bit. I think they've pulled them back. I
love the newer ones. I think the ones that have recently come out are really good, especially because I kind of like, I don't know, I like series that kind of go back like that and tell a part of the story that you didn't know. Like this last one that came out, right? Like it tells a little piece of the story, a chunk of how they got the blueprints of the Death Star, and that's just kind of fun. I like those type of stories. So.
I thought Rogue One was entertainment. It was put together well. That's the thing. I think they've just gotten a little more entertaining and less gimmicky. I felt like those, 1, 2, and 3, the original, not the originals, but in the order that they're in the movies. I felt like they went off the rails a little bit on just making them too gimmicky.
Right.
And I felt like we came back, even though the last Star Wars was just a repeat of the first one from a story perspective. Right. I mean, you could almost line them up side by side and they are super close. Right. I just thought they were great entertainment. And so for that, I think Star Wars is a great franchise and I think they'll get an opportunity. So in honor of that, I've got my Darth Vader, World's Greatest Dad or something like that. And then it's a ton of fun. We are total nerds here at the Collison House, and so everybody celebrated Star Wars Day. Today we had a group text message that was going around, or a group on Messenger going around with different memes. There must have been a bunch of memes that went around today. And where my son worked at Midas, they put on, I guess TBS had here in the United States had Star Wars on all day. So they put that on in the office, and it's a good Star Wars Day. So, did you, Edward, where you work? You got small business there. Anybody celebrating any geekery with the Star Wars stuff today?
No, I don't. We were not. I was not even in the office enough to know. So no.
All right, that's the beauty of being a small business owner, right? From that standpoint. So good. Hey, let's talk about your business really quick. Let's just catch up with you. Alpha BTC, right, is your business there. You're an Omaha guy, so you can commiserate with all the rain that we've been. Although, hey, we're not complaining. We could be in the South. And our friends in Arkansas are just getting killed at the moment. And so we haven't had that much rain. But, Edward, talk a little bit. How's business going? How's Alpha BTC going? Give us a little update.
It's going well. We do consulting, and then we are in the process of building a Bitcoin ATM network. So you can take cash and go buy Bitcoins without, there's some identity verification still, but it's more immediate than the online versions. And so you can take cash there and buy Bitcoin, or you can take your Bitcoin there and get cash out of the machine. So we're in the process. Last month we hit another high again as far as dollar volume. So the past 6 months, I think we've just continued to hit new highs, and we're about to getting close to the end of closing a round to start adding to the network besides just the one in Omaha that we have right now. So.
Yeah, I think we talked at Infotech a little bit about adding additional ATMs, and I think I even talked you into letting me be an investor in an ATM. So
I think you're waiting on an email from me, and so I need to get that.
No, it's interesting. Maybe I'll tag that interview here on the end of this one if folks want to stay around. It'll make it a really long podcast, but if you want to hear the conversation that Edward and I had at Infotech, it's a good one. And I think maybe that was after, maybe we didn't record that part where we were talking about that, but so still the one ATM out at Jones Brothers. Thoughts of any more you can talk about? Maybe you don't want to disclose any of that stuff, but
yeah, no, that one is 67th and Center in Exarban. So the next, I have several locations that lined up as far as where we want them to go and where they've said they would be willing to, but I don't know which one's going to be first at the moment. I have in my head an idea, but nothing solid yet. So.
Good. So you got some plans. That's good. I think that's good for Omaha.
Come out west. We need something more Village Point area. Yep. So
Michael set one up at his house if you want.
Yeah, there we go.
I mean, that's the question: is how many? What's the population density? Like, what size of the city do you need to sustain 1, 2, 3, etc.
Right.
Have you looked at other cities, and are there some formulas when we think about, are there bigger cities like San Francisco or New York or Atlanta or LA where there are more, and are we learning anything from those cities as far as putting Bitcoin ATMs in?
I think the biggest thing is, at least for us, at the stage we're at, is the biggest hurdle or the next step in the process is the Department of Banking in Nebraska has been great to work with, and they get it, they know what we're doing, and they're very accepting of it. So the biggest hurdle moving outside of Nebraska is going to be building that relationship with the Department of Banking in that particular state. So that's the biggest hurdle. It's just getting them on board with what we're doing. So,
are there, Edward, if we think about Bitcoin ATMs around the country, you guys have one. Are there other companies that are doing this as well? And how many, if you were to kind of guess, how many ATMs around the United States there are? What do you think?
I believe the count is up to about 600 nationwide. It's probably grown a little bit since I've last looked, and then it was about 900 to 1,000 last time I looked globally. So the largest companies that are also doing this probably, I think the largest is around 60 or something like that. So there's a few that have 30 or 40, and so that's kind of what we're aiming for. So
cool, that's good. A couple years ago, I think when we had you on the first time, Bitcoin was, well, let's just say, I think in the mid 300s. I'm going to say it's like 326 or something like that. And you'd kind of said, and what I loved is, you're not really speculating when we think about the price. You said it's kind of built into the system. It's going to grow in value. It's going to do these things. And you've been right every single time. It continues to grow. Closing price, I think I looked around 1,100. I've seen it as high as 1,300. So it's is that wrong?
Nope. Yep. Last week it's gone up. I don't remember the number percentage, but we're now up to about 1,550. So.
Oh, is that what it is right now?
Yeah.
I thought I must have been looking at an old. Yeah. I must have been looking at old numbers. So, okay, so 1,500.
Yep. It almost hit 17. So it crossed. Within it's broken all sorts of records just in the past couple of weeks. But the previous record was like 1,300. So it's broken that. It hit 1,700 roughly.
Wow.
And now it's took a little step back. So
yeah, which is good, right? PTD says in the chat room he has a number 762 here in the United States. Does that sound right from a number of ATMs?
Oh, sorry, number of ATMs. I thought you were saying the price. Yeah. Okay,
no.
Number of ATMs. Yeah, 700. So yeah, that's been a little bit while since it's been 600.
Yeah. No, he looked that up for us. So Peter, thanks for doing that as well. So 1,500. It continues to drive forward. It's making me wish, Edward, I had spent more. I talked about setting up an account that would automatically deposit in, and I never did. And not because I don't trust it. I just didn't get it done. It's just one of those things, like, you're supposed to contribute to your 401k, but you never set it up, right? Or you're supposed to automatically move savings from your paycheck into a savings account, but you never get that kind of thing set up. Mike, as you hear those numbers, you've been around, we've been talking about this thing, to kind of make you wish you had you jumped in a little bit on it.
We say this every single time, so maybe this will be the time that after the show I go out and buy some.
Edward, what's from a math perspective, not a speculative perspective, but as we think about just from a math perspective, and we think at 1,500 now, let's just say, what is the growth potential? I mean, is there a max, a theoretical max, taking speculation out when we think about is there a max to this thing?
I think that if you continue the upward trend, I think I might have said this when we were at Infotech the other day or previously, if you just do a linear extrapolation from where it started back in the day to where it's going to be in whenever the next century or whatever, the number I wound up with is about $15,000. Include any speculation, any political factors. That's just pure linear, like just a straight line. So, yeah.
So then how would something like, okay, you have usually a stock split as things start to get super high priced, because at $15,000, it's going to take out a large share of the market that would even be able to purchase, a Bitcoin. I guess you can do fractions of a Bitcoin, I guess, at that point. And maybe is that how they deal with it, is you buy fractions of the coin?
Yeah, we're gonna get into the nitty gritty a little bit, but so to address your question, there's 8 decimal places behind. There's 8 zeros behind the decimal place, so you can get down to very, very small transactions. So it's not like the cents, dollars where you only have 2 cents. So you could buy, you can still go down and buy $1 worth of Bitcoin at the ATM if you wanted.
You can, okay.
Yes. The problem is, and one of the drama in the industry right now is you have to pay a fee for that amount, and so you wind up, what happens is you're going to buy $1 worth of Bitcoin, but you're going to pay 10 cents, 20 cents to get that amount to you, right?
Okay.
It's to send that amount, it's going to cost you 20 cents, which is pretty high tax. Versus if you bought $100 worth of Bitcoin, you're still going to spend 20 cents for that transaction, and so so as you get smaller, if the transaction fees start to increase, then that number gets closer together. And so it starts to become burdensome from a financial standpoint to buy a smaller amount or use a smaller amount. So that's
same thing as stock though, right? Like your broker usually charges a set amount per trade. So if you buy some really low end stock for not that much, you're kind of getting ripped depending on how your broker sets it up.
But if you go to 3 different stores every day, buy 3 different things, you're paying 20 cents extra every time you go and do it, every time you use Bitcoin for that transaction. So it's a little bit different than making a stock trade, which you don't do so often. The other piece of that is when you get into smaller amounts, you wind up with a cost. If I go and I say I'm going to buy something, like right now in our example, we have a $3,000 limit on at the ATM. Well, if you want to buy 2 Bitcoins right now, you can't buy 2 Bitcoins anymore because you have a limit that's put in place by FinCEN, by the federal government. So that becomes a hurdle as well, because now you have to, now what do you do if you want to, you just can't buy 2 Bitcoins at the ATM. It's just, that's the end of the story. So
what is the cap, Edward?
$3,000 a day.
Okay.
So
that's still a lot. Yeah. That's still a lot.
Right, but if you're trying to buy something from somebody and they're asking you for 2 Bitcoins, you're just out of luck. So,
gotcha. I gotcha. Yeah. That makes sense. So, well, we suffered this problem with ATMs for a while, where there's a max you can take out, and so if somebody was going to go down and try and get 3, or for fraud reasons, they keep that capped. So that's not unprecedented when we think about that. And you could deposit it one day and deposit the rest the next, right? That resets.
Correct,
and,
yeah.
and you could make that.
I mean, I guess if you're going to buy a car or something expensive, you would plan ahead, so it wouldn't be an impulse buy necessarily.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You'd have to do the same thing if you were going to withdraw money from your ATM. In fact, the limits, I think, here in the state of Nebraska are even much lower on the amount of cash you can get out of an ATM. So that would be a struggle as well. Well, it's we talked a little bit about this in the interview, so we won't belabor this too long. But great opportunities in with Bitcoin, and certainly it is a transaction. Or back years ago when we first started having on a couple of years ago, I kind of came at this from a misunderstanding of what this is all about, and of course, it's staying here, and it's becoming a way of doing financial transactions. One of the reasons it's doing that, of course, is because it's based, and correct me if I'm wrong, but based on the blockchain, right? This idea of a blockchain and the ledger, and the way all that comes together and works, right? The encryption of it and the security around it. When you were at Infotech, you spent some time talking about blockchain. And Bitcoin gets mentioned all the time, but of course, the back end of it, or I could be using the wrong words on this, but the blockchain has a lot of more practical applications than just Bitcoin. And so can you talk a little bit, first of all, bring us up to speed when we talk about the blockchain, just give us a quick 3-minute kind of overview of what we're talking about, and then we'll kind of dig in a little bit. Where are we at in 2017 with its uses?
Sure. So the blockchain is essentially a way of it's a ledger. It's a way of keeping accounts that says I have X amount of Bitcoin and you do not have that Bitcoin. So if I am going to send you that Bitcoin, I need to produce the private key. When you get into cryptography, you're talking about a public key and a private key, just like if you're doing PGP, trying to encrypt your email and stuff like that. So I need to produce the private key, which is a long, I think it's like 55 characters, alphanumeric, uppercase, lowercase. And if I can produce that private key, then I can send you money out of my wallet. So the blockchain is basically the system that tracks who is sending what or who holds what. And so you could take that, you could take your wallet, your public key, essentially, your private key, and you could take that and store it away somewhere in a paper format, and then pull it out again in 20 years, and it would still, the blockchain would still accept that public and private key as a store of value. And so so you could do all sorts of things with that same technology, and essentially you start to overlap to some degree with just a traditional database, and you start to get into why would you do it with a blockchain, and then you start to talk more about security and infrastructure and some of the networking stuff that I've been doing for 15 years now. So
yeah, so certainly that is what makes Bitcoin work, but there are other right that
yes, the difference is that Bitcoin there's a few key terms, and one of them is trustless, meaning I don't need to know who is on the other end of the Bitcoin transaction, versus Microsoft, who is trying to spin up a blockchain, and they because they want to know who's on the other end of the transaction, and when it comes to vendors, and then there's the end user beyond that, one step removed, but they're on a private blockchain, and so they can permission to blockchain, and so they're choosing who is allowed to transact on that blockchain.
Okay, so is it fair to say, so Bitcoin's an implementation of the blockchain where you're saying that condition is true? If I wanted to create, in Microsoft's case, I'm a large company that's handling a lot of different financial transactions, so to speak, and it may make sense for me to have my own private blockchain. Did I say that right? What is that? What I would say? Or okay, and so in their case, they're kind of stipulating the rules then to say, with Bitcoin, we don't care who's on the other end, or it's to Bitcoin's advantage not to know, or it's safety and security, whatever. Microsoft's case, they're dealing with their vendors, or they're dealing with people where that part is really important. So they've just implemented it a little bit differently. You've mentioned in the past there are other versions of Bitcoin, other kinds of implementations of that, right? Different. Are those going anywhere, by the way? That's just a little sidetrack.
Yes. So one of the huge differences between the run-up, there was a run-up in before Mt. Gox collapsed, that when it ran up to $1,300 before and then dropped to $200. One of the difference between now and then is that as Bitcoin has been going up to 1550 or so, that the altcoins, the Ethereums, the Litecoins, the other coins out there have also gone up side by side. And so you're seeing this, a lot of buy-in industry-wide, not just Bitcoin itself, which gives a lot more credibility to the price increase recently. So,
okay, is it better for the industry that that's happening, that there's multi-players out there in the space?
Yeah. So when you talk about Microsoft, say, I'll give you an example. Say someday it's outlawed that you can't buy T-shirts anymore, or something like that. Microsoft then has the capacity to say, okay, if you want to buy a T-shirt, you need to go through additional verification methods, and then you can buy a T-shirt on our blockchain. Versus Bitcoin, where the transaction would occur no matter what. It is unstoppable, if you will. Like, and they don't care what you're buying or selling on there, because it's just a P2P transaction. So
it's completely open and completely anonymous.
Yes, pseudonymous, but yeah, I mean, I can track IP addresses and stuff like that on there. So I mean, you can get some information.
That could be spoofed, though, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's funny. It's kind of crazy, but no, cool. That really, for me, every time we talk about this, I just learn a ton about, the industry and where it's going. I think it's here to stay and it's going to be around for a while. So, okay. So again, we keep coming back, or it's easy to implement this to the financial system, but you mentioned Microsoft doing their own private. Are there other industries where this might fit? This kind of system may fit well for what they're currently doing.
So the financial sectors or financial transactions are they're almost the default for what you would use this for. I'll give you another example would be like Disney. Disney is started to work in dabble in blockchain. Why? Because they have all these transactions that are happening at rides and other experiences, whether it's they want to just give you some coins that you can go use on the cruise when you go and play a game or something like that. So they're seeing it as advantageous because they have all these different silos of information, and blockchain makes it a little easier to connect all these different databases and stuff like that. The difference to differentiate a little bit between the database and the blockchain technology is with a database, you've got this fragile egg in the center of your server farm somewhere that if anybody gets that server or that database, that you've got a lot of issues. You see these hacks all the time. Well, and you've got to protect it with all sorts of layers. The blockchain kind of merges those things together. Because you've got the cryptography along with the information, the contents or the data, they kind of all combine. And so as things transact or as information is passed back and forth, it's a lot less scary on the open internet if somebody actually sees that information going across.
So it makes it easier from an API standpoint or from a security standpoint. The system is inherently secure, so to speak. It's got more security built into it just natively. And so maybe an easier implementation. So if you're in a situation like Disney where you need to have multi-access to this ledger from all over, from all around the world, you got people transacting on boats and ships and in theme parks and in hotels and right all those things that have to happen. And if you've done the Disney experience, it's wonderful, by the way. But it just makes that, what I hear you say, it makes that database implementation and the security around all those financial transactions more secure and maybe easier to develop on. Would that be right? Or
yeah, so the security and IT aspect is one. The other way to look at it is if you've got all these currencies coming in from all over the world, because people are coming in globally to Disneyland, if you could get them all to just buy Disney coins, then you have one standard of measure and you've eliminated all the other the currency exchange rate issues. And so again, you're talking about why is Bitcoin so successful globally? Because you don't have it. It's a standard of measure. And so you could potentially spin up your own coin, like the Disney coin or whatever they're calling it. Dragon Chain is the name of the blockchain. There's no coin yet to my knowledge. But if you have this Disney coin, then you just go spend Disney coins, and everybody has the same understanding of what, the Disneyland Japan knows that it takes 3 Disney coins to ride this ride. The Disneyland Florida knows that it's 3 Disney coins to ride this coin or to ride this ride. So it's easier for accounting, I imagine.
Sure. Well, and is that Microsoft in the Xbox world has these Xbox points, right? Yeah. And I don't know if that's being blockchain driven, but I never put 2 and 2 together. That's kind of an implementation like blockchain, right? Where you can buy it because they operate in all kinds of different countries. They convert those. Oh, that frustrates. I don't know about you, but that system frustrates the crap out of me because we're so US centric, I think, and we're used to dealing with everything in dollars or whatever. But it is a complicated situation, right? To think about, you might have dozens or hundreds of different kinds of currencies trying to transact on this system. You got to convert it to something, and then those something have to mean something, right? From that standpoint. So,
and so think about, and then so now going back into the security and IT standpoint of if I'm Susie and I if I paid for my stuff in the US and I'm actually going to Disney Japan or something like that, what does it take? We were talking about the MFA and stuff like that earlier. What does it take to unlock or gain access to my money when I'm in Japan if the if the money is, the Disney coins are in the server farm in the United States where I bought them originally or something like that. So now all you need is, she just needs her public and private key, and she knows, and then we know how much Sally has in her Disney coin wallet, and there's not necessarily any private information going across and you can put all that in your Disney band that you're riding all the rides with, and so again, it makes it more secure and easier to manage. So
yeah, no, it's a great example. I would never have put Disney in that space, but it's a great example from the way you kind of present it. Are there others when we think about industries where that kind of makes sense?
Besides, so the other big one is logistics, and actually identity as well, because again, you have this, as long as you can keep your private key private, and it takes a different way of thinking, just like MFA takes a little bit of a different way of thinking. As long as you can keep your private keys private, that you can prove who you are on the internet until the end of time, until you die. You can do whatever you need to do on the internet, and people will know it's you. There isn't any more of this stolen identity. And so there's all sorts of systems, and trying to figure out, should it be centrally managed, because a blockchain can be run centrally, or should it be a distributed open system? And so I would obviously lean more towards as open as possible, and using something like Ethereum is a lot different than spinning up your own identity management system that could still be compromised if somebody gets into your server farm. So, yeah.
Yeah. So identity would be a good, and amazingly, we have an identity problem globally when we think about people's information and their data. I think we've talked about this before. I know my name and address and phone number and social security number and maybe my bank account numbers. They're pretty much public. It teeters. I feel like sometimes we teeter on the edge of just getting ripped off. Mike, I don't know. Do you feel that way about your stuff, or does it feel like it's pretty secure?
I kind of have a false sense of security, I guess. I have a very good understanding of how it's not secure, but I just like to think it's all good. And it's like, we'll just believe it. But the more and more, one of my email accounts has been being used lately to be signed up for services. Now they're not being activated because I keep getting all the emails like, hey, confirm your activation. And they're to real legit. They're like Steam and Scratch from MIT and all this stuff. And so it's like, okay, obviously like people can do a lot of stuff, but I don't know. Yeah. I just like to live in a fantasy land. It's a good place to live nowadays. Like, we're good. I'm doing the best. I'm doing everything I can to be secure about it. So that's all that matters, right? Like, I'm not being stupid about where I put my stuff. Yeah. So,
Edward, what would be the implications of, one of the things I've always mulled around in the back of my head is, what would be the implications, Mike, or would you care if instead of giving a social security number when you were born, you got a private key instead? Would you be hurt by that? Would you care? I think
it'd be awesome. Like, why not, right? I think it's obviously more secure. Now, memorizing it for every time you have to give that to someone would be a pain in the butt, but
and Edward, how fast would that private key? Okay, so the social security number, they came up with, what's that, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9 numbers, right, on a social security number. Of course, the financial systems weren't in place. The technology wasn't in place when they came up with that number. I don't think they ever imagined it being what it was. But from a private key standpoint, what kind of steps do you have to take so I have a private key instead of a social security number? What kind of steps do I need to take when we think about keeping this secure? Is it just something that has to be in my head, or are there ways to keep track of it, or how does that work?
Yeah, there are things called brain wallets where you can actually, the safest way to do it is, you have a baby, they're born, you put it in a safe deposit box, and you never touch it until they're 16 or whatever, when they actually need it, type thing.
Right.
The memorization is the only real downside I can come up with to it. The only other thing to consider that would need to be worked out would be, what does happen in the instance where you lose the piece of paper it was written on, and you do need to go get another one. Issuing a new private key and recovering the stuff from the old account is a little more of a higher hurdle than reissuing a new social security card. So.
Right. Yeah. I always think like we should be able to come up with these systems and like, oh, let's tie it to biometrics, or let's tie it to our retina or whatever. And then you watch, I think it was an Iron Man where they come in and put that device on that guy's face and it just cuts his eye now, you know, and they take that in and you think, oh, let's not tie it to body parts. You know, if they really want it bad, they're going to take my finger, or, you know, it gives the whole term pull my finger a whole different connotation, right? So I get a little weary. That's not the right word. I get a little jittery when we think about different ways. And I think that's really the problem at the end of the day, is what is that super secure way of only identifying you? Multi-factor is a great idea in that. In other words, you know, having two separate things that have to be together at the same time, that makes it harder. But it's still not perfect. And maybe that's fundamentally the problem with security at the end of the day. There is no perfect way to do it. Would you agree or disagree?
When we haven't talked about Ethereum at all, and which is another, it's another open blockchain. So in market share, there's Bitcoin, there's Ethereum, there's Litecoin. Those are all pretty much up at the top of the charts all the time. So Ethereum and the price of Ethereum has gone from whatever, $14 to $60 following just a couple past month, you know, few months that following Bitcoin's rise. And Ethereum is essentially, it takes while Bitcoin is a great store of value, Ethereum is more of a programming language, and it gives you the ability to actually do things with build transactions or build smart contracts is what it's made for. And so when you get into smart contracts and you start to say, okay, I need to renew my driver's license. So I could go to there would be a web app for the Department of Motor Vehicles in Nebraska. I can go to that website and tell them whatever they want, expiration date, address, whatever, and then I sign that transaction with my private key, and they'll just reissue me a new license without me having to go into there and go fill out the paperwork and stuff like that. So the I mean, it's not, you know, when you start to talk about wills and stuff like that, I can build a will in Ethereum. I can put in my 8 grandkids' private or public addresses, and at some point in the future, something will trigger, and that money will get distributed. And according to the smart contract that I put together, it might be 40 years down the road, but none of that information in terms of, you know, that's all automatic, which couldn't necessarily do with the Social Security number, and none of that information is going to be on the blockchain in 40 years, just like it is today with Ethereum. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when we think about it, still, it's one of those things, you know, I think we're the weakest link. Other Jim says in the chat room, you know, synthetic life forms will be born with a private key, you know, and actually, you know, hey, at some point in time, you, from a DNA sequencing standpoint, your DNA could be what unlocks, right? That could be the key. And so the backbone of the blockchain could be DNA sequencing, and that could be a part of your key. So
they could still, yes, it could be a part of it, but they still could sequence you. If somebody can get your blood.
Yeah, no, totally. But maybe that's 2-factor, right? It's you and your DNA, or, you know, I don't know.
One of the things I brought up when I was talking to Infotech was, why do we still use databases? And there's not, at the end of the day, there's not a really, it's only, the only answer really to that question is because we have for 20 years. Yeah. And obviously it's going to take a sea change. It's a major shift. You know, you got to have all the big guys on board first. But you are continually seeing more names. What's happening though is some people are jumping, like kind of hopping into it and then figure out what to do with this or whatever, and then hopping back out, or hopping into it and saying, oh, it's too much effort, too much infrastructure needs to be replaced, we're getting back out type thing. And so the folks that are getting in and sticking to it, you know, when I talked about auditing and the way this is kind of like a spreadsheet that never changes essentially, you know, you're talking about, that's why Deloitte and those guys are getting into it, SAP and stuff like that, KPMG, because they are learning, they are realizing that they can do their audits without actually going in and doing their audits anymore. And so it's a time saver for them, and they need to know about it because their customers are going to start asking about it, because it's going to save the customers a lot of money. So
yeah. Mike, has that shown up on your radar at all?
Yeah, it actually has, especially with SAP. Yep.
Yeah. Super interesting when you just when you think about, you know, we talk a lot about gadgets and some of those kinds of things. When we talk about security, talk about passwords and some of this, but there's some, Edward, when we think about, you say it could replace databases, and we know the relational database that has been around for 30 years or so in mainstream. It's really slow. Is the blockchain any faster? When we just think about transaction speed, because relational databases to a point are great, but then they really bog down on high transaction volumes. Is it different with blockchain?
So that's one of the main
positives.
Opponent? No.
Negatives.
The
Okay.
the opposite. So on the Bitcoin blockchain, there isn't a it is fairly slow in compared to more traditional networks. So the transaction time on Bitcoin, I probably mentioned this before, is about 10 minutes to confirm a block. I believe it's something like 14 seconds or a minute or something like that. And they're working on ways to get that down. So same thing with Bitcoin, they're coming out with newer, different technology to make that make those transactions happen faster. Same thing with Ethereum. In terms of blockchains, you can really control how slow you want the transactions to happen. So yeah, transaction speed is not really, as long as you're willing to spend the money on the infrastructure, it doesn't really, transaction speed is not really a factor necessarily. If you can control the environment, which you can't necessarily do so well with Ethereum and Bitcoin. So
yeah, so you're not gonna put a high transaction system on top of this where speed is critical for the application.
Well, and nobody's, so we're not advocating that you go burn all your firewalls and get rid of all your databases. You can't, and you shouldn't. Right. So there's not necessarily, we're not saying you're never going to have a database running next to this blockchain. What we're saying is using a blockchain is a more secure way to secure your data, essentially. So we're not saying they're not going to have a database.
Are there implementations where the two are working together, where you might have a traditional database in a tied to the blockchain in some way, or are they usually separate?
No, other than the something, unless you're doing a purely financial transaction, there's a little bit of metadata associated with the transaction itself on the blockchain that you can store some actual words and stuff like that. But if you're going to go outside of like 100 characters or whatever that limit is, you pretty much need a database next to it. So I mean, we have an application now that we developed that is essentially that. It's all the transactions are stored on the blockchain, and then all the etc. is for the most part all outside of that.
So a relational database, what it's good for, what it's best at, is keeping track of meta. Keeping a person with stuff, what their eye color, hair, age, some of those kinds of things. It's really good at building that. And then you're storing all the meta inside the traditional relational database, but that has a tie, that has a foreign key or a primary key that comes over to the blockchain, and the financial transactions are stored on the blockchain side. That makes sense.
You're essentially, so if I'm going to a really basic spreadsheet scenario, I am Edward, I'm a male, this is my birthday, this is my address, etc. All of that, to access that, I need to give you my private key, which is pretty much how a lot of security just works today. The difference is when you start to deal with how those keys are stored with the blockchain, those things never change, if that makes sense, versus somebody that could go and potentially manipulate or salt or whatever that information otherwise. So
because they've all been pre-calculated, those values, right?
And it's simplistic, yes.
Yeah. I know, but it's an easy way. I think for the average guy, it's an easy way of thinking about it. When you're creating those transactions, that's what all the CPU does, right? It's generating all this data that's secure, these randomized numbers, and that takes CPU cycles, and that takes time, and that's what these things do. So it makes sense.
Outside of the private environments, you start to, you could get really rebellious and really crazy and start to talk about, what could you someday, you're disrupting the financial sector. So what you can't do with a private blockchain that you can do with a public blockchain is potentially, well, someday, why would we need a bank? And those, if a bank builds a blockchain, you still have the bank. And so you could, so you could go down the rabbit hole really far and just say, well, this could be the way we deal with money in the future, which is not necessarily the same as using a blockchain to transact Disney tickets. So
yeah, no. Mike, any questions? Anything?
Too many to squeeze into the last 30 minutes. But yeah, no, it's one of those things that, I mean, like he mentioned with Deloitte and KPMG having to keep up with this sort of stuff, it's one of those topics that I've been meaning to deep dive into because I hear about it more. I mean, obviously we have we have our teams that deal with this. It's not something that every single advisory or audit person is having to deal with on a day-to-day basis, but we definitely have our teams that are. But as Edward mentioned, it's something that's becoming more and more popular with the clients. So even just being able to talk about it and communicate effectively with your client about it, even if you're not the one dealing with it, is important. So a lot of questions, but it's been a good conversation. That's now I know specifically what to Google instead of just Googling, blockchain. Now I can at least Google some more deeper issues.
That makes sense though, doesn't it? I mean, I think just this conversation kind of helps.
Oh, definitely.
Some of those. Every time I talk with Edward, I learn a little bit more. Now I'm just dangerous at this point with it, right?
It's a good thing I don't have his phone number because he'd be getting a lot of texts and calls from me. Just, hey, so about this.
Shoot me an email. I'd be happy to have coffee and we can talk more.
That sounds good.
I'll end on two things. Another part of why the price is driving potentially is because the SEC has recently said there's a Bitcoin IRA that opened about at the end of last year, and now there are I think at least there's a Bitcoin ETF and an Ethereum ETF that the SEC is now considering that would go on to the NYSE or NASDAQ or whatever. And so that's just for a point of fact. And so, but that's, as far as mainstream adoption, the fact that if this ETF goes through, you're going to have a lot of outside money hopping into the network. And so part of this 1,500, the anticipation is that there's going to be a lot more buying going on in the future. And so, there's a little bit of speculation in there, but the fact that the SEC is reconsidering it is good news. The other thing is you also have a lot of what's called initial coin offerings, like IPOs, but they're ICOs, and people are creating their own coins. It's fairly easy to create a coin. So this last point is just a cautionary tale to listeners of be careful that you're actually buying Bitcoin, that you're not buying some guy that's made a coin and he just wants to sell it for a certain reason. Like he's got this unique angle that you've never heard of. There's a company called OneCoin out there, and there is a huge scam. And so if you see OneCoin, they claim blockchain based, but that's very doubtful. Don't buy OneCoin, but buy Bitcoin. But anyways, my point is just make sure you're buying what you're actually think you're buying. That's all.
If you're going to set up a wallet, kind of who's your preferred wallet at this point?
Yeah, so my preferred is Coinbase still. I mean, they still, you've got to verify your identity and stuff like that. They have limits, some pretty hard limits in the beginning, but Coinbase is still the go-to. So
I think I actually set up an account there. I got a login. I'm not sure it'll do anything yet, but I think we did that. In digital currency exchanged, 6 billion. This is from their front page. 6 billion, 33 countries supported. 7.6 million customers served. That's like McDonald's. They're rivaling McDonald's at this point. So billions and billions served. That's pretty cool. So that's Coinbase, just like it sounds, coinbase.com if you want to go out there and check that out. When you think about the future, just a little bit, we ask you this every time you're on. We talked a little bit about pricing and some other things. Anything you're really outside of what we talked about already? Anything you're really excited about or you're keeping your eye on when we think about what's going on in the consumer space or in your space that gets you excited?
I think we've talked a little bit in previous episodes about some of the confusion in the regulatory environment and the government that still kind of exists. Maybe Trump can sort that out. One of his titles, the title is escaping me. His name is Mike Mulvaney, but he's in the administration, I believe, and he is actually he was a senator and he was on the Bitcoin caucus, and so he has some financial administrative position in the White House, I think, and so the fact that hopefully they can get things sorted out in that regard. A lot of what Russia has reversed their stance. Philippines is taking a fairly favorable stance on Bitcoin. So from the political realm is where I'm most excited, I think, about what's coming. And then and that's also driving the price. So some of that news has also been driving the price. So
okay, some positive. I don't want to get political, but Trump administration pretty pro Bitcoin, would you say?
Well, I think just from I'm glad I'm glad we didn't have any major problems in the past 3 years. It would be nice if we can get a little more clarification and get more in line between departments. We didn't have any major issues in the past 3 or 4 years, and so hopefully that can continue. Yeah.
Okay. So the U.S. in general would be pretty pro Bitcoin at this point when we think about what the direction we're heading.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and it's way more complicated than that. You know, you're a pretty exact guy, and you're way smarter than me. And so I know you want to be cautious about what you say with that, right? You want to deliver what you promise, and so I appreciate that. Just from that, it gets a good. It's again for the average guy, it gives us some good direction of, hey, are we currently swimming upstream or swimming downstream? Are we having, is it getting beat on from a Washington standpoint, or is it getting some momentum from a Washington standpoint? So it's good to know.
My only hesitation is that it gets treated like, the problem is that not because of the view of Bitcoin from the administration or the government, but because money laundering stuff that we go through, there's no escaping that. And so then you start to question, like, why are we doing any of that? Because they can do it with cash, but they can't do it with Bitcoin type thing. And so it's like,
yeah. Well, ransomware has gotten, we talked about this before. Ransomware is using Bitcoin as a transaction. Of course, that pisses people off, and so you're like, oh, I mean, here it is. It's a perfect way of doing financial transactions, and these guys are exploiting that system, right? And they're taking the reasons, all the best reasons, and of course, we of course have to be smarter with our computers and some of the things we do and exploit. Just yesterday from Google, where email going around had phishing to send you to a very good looking yet very fake Google, where it would start. And this is where honestly, it would be interesting. So this LastPass may save you in this case because it doesn't recognize the URL. It's not an exact URL. It won't autofill your passwords for you. You might kind of wonder what's going on and give you an opportunity to at least check and say, hey, what? This is odd. I'm normally, because it would take you to a very good looking login page. You would put in your username and password for your Google account thinking you were logging in, and it would actually steal that information and get access to your account that way, right?
What was the difference in the URL? I never saw.
You know what? I didn't look.
Okay.
But it couldn't have been exactly the same, right? It would have to be something just slightly different and it may be close, maybe something that's kind of close from that standpoint, but it wouldn't be exactly the same. And I imagine I'd have to have Amber verify this, but I would imagine LastPass would not offer to automatically fill if it's not exactly right. Now, if you put it in manually, say you did get spoofed and you did put it in manually, it would offer to save it for you at that point. And you just got hacked. Mike, did you know that was going around? Did you heard that?
Well, KPMG sent out a big internal email warning us. So that's usually actually how I hear about all this stuff is we get a work email like, hey, this is it. Watch out for it.
I actually got one of those, and it looked like it was from my sister. And I thought, this is kind of weird. And I did click on it. Now, by the time I clicked on it, Google had taken everything down. They had blocked the users that were doing it. They had blocked the accounts. They had actually done a lot of things. They're pretty powerful in what they can do pretty quickly when they want to on the internet. And they had taken everything down, and it wouldn't even resolve. So by the time I clicked on it, and I was like, oh, you dumbass. As soon as I clicked on it,
you clicked on it?
I did click on it. Yeah, I was like, I wonder what she sent it. Like, it's my sister. She would only send me something. Like, and I saw the email address, and I wasn't really thinking. It's one of those things that kind of caught me by surprise. It was the end of the day. Click. Now, it didn't resolve. Didn't go anywhere.
So it was a link to a Google Doc or something?
Yeah, I clicked the Google link doc, and it tried to go to set up the password, or to put the login information. And I thought, this is odd. I mean, the whole thing I was thinking is kind of odd. And then as soon as it didn't resolve and I got the blocked page, I went, oh. So then I went online, and sure enough, and I'm like, oh man, I got lucky. I got really lucky that I hadn't done that. Although I don't think I would have put my username and password.
Did you talk to your sister? Had she Had she done it?
I have not. I sent her an email back saying, "Hey, what the hell?" And I haven't heard from her. So I probably should
call her. If I had gotten
her.
one from you, I would have opened it instantaneously because you are the only person who ever sends me Google Docs. I mean, it's just whoever uses it the most for our show notes or whatever we use.
Yeah.
So
well, that's why it's a good phishing attack.
It was a great, it's a good one.
And it's one of those it looks like you're getting it from that person, and
right.
And then and I don't know. I'm not sure if that means she had gotten phished or if it was just grabbing her address out of my address book or something along those lines, right? And jamming that thing in there. Certainly the address it was from is not, it was like HHHHH, at whatever. As soon as I saw that, that's when I think I saw that as I was clicking. I'm like, no, don't go there. But see how easy it is. And I'm pretty careful. Yeah. I'm pretty careful about my stuff. I hadn't heard about. Then of course I heard it everywhere. As soon as I was driving home, I heard it on the news. I heard it on Alexa when I was listening to the news the next morning. It was all over the place. So it certainly is a weird world that we live in, that kind of stuff is. Edward, any gadgets, since we're a gadget show and I got just a few minutes with you, any gadgets that you're, when we think about phones or stuff, new stuff that you got your eye on, any of that stuff? Or I see you as kind of just a pretty average guy in the world of gadgets, but anything new? Did I lose you? I missed you there. I think you lost.
Yeah, I think I'm going to bite the bullet and get.
Oh, now we just lost him.
Yeah, you're locking up for me, Edward. Hold on one second. Yeah, your bandwidth just went to crap for just a second, so hang tight. Can you hear us now? So you were saying you're going to bite the bullet. Oh, good. Let's try it again. You said you're going to bite the bullet. That's what we heard.
Yeah. Oh, so I was trying to hold out till the new release, the new Samsungs come out in September. But I think I'm gonna just wait or just get what's out there now. And so
you gonna go with the S8?
8 or the 8S, yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful phone. Right. It is. I went and saw it. I went down to Best Buy and saw it the other day. It was Friday night. It was or Saturday night. My wife was out. My daughter was out. I was a bachelor. So what did I do when I'm a bachelor? I went to Fazoli's for dinner. I went to Best Buy. What a loser I am.
My favorite part is the Fazoli's. Best Buy is okay. But when you went to Fazoli's,
I was like, where can I go? I could go to Applebee's or I could go to DJ's. Yeah, I went to Fazoli's.
Oh yeah, I love Fazoli's. I love it.
Go ahead, Edward.
This has the longer battery life, but it's so big. I'm just still torn between, do I want that thing to be sitting out of my pocket or not? So.
Yeah, it's a monster, and I'm with you. I've got the 6, and this is just a perfect size for me, and I could go bigger, but I don't know. I just like how this fits in my hand. I like how I can do one finger across. I can do I don't know. Mike, you went with the bigger one, right?
Yeah, I've always had the Plus, and I've always I've never regretted it. I love it. That curved phone. Have you looked, Edward? Have you gone out and looked at the S, or the 8? Have you looked at the curved screen on that thing? I was like, it's just going to go flying out of my hands.
Yeah. No, my favorite was I had the Note Edge, and so I don't really like the double curve. I like the single curve, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, this is double curve all the way. Go ahead, Mike.
But the cases they made for those things are laughable. It's like these 2 little clips. One clips on the top and one clips on the bottom. Have you seen these?
I've not, no.
Oh, so imagine flipping your phone over and you have like a little plastic strip on the bottom, nothing in the middle, and then a little plastic strip on the top. It's literally 2 little things you snap on the top and bottom. You have to Google it. I just don't know how. Whoever created that Samsung, how they still have a job is beyond me.
There's some questions about who has jobs at Samsung right now and who doesn't.
Well, okay, yeah. It's probably not as big a deal as the battery guy, but the battery guy and the case guy should both be, fired.
We don't follow this very carefully, but there's big turmoil going on right now in South Korea around Samsung and the government. I mean, certainly Samsung's the biggest country in South Korea, the biggest company in South Korea, and that may or may not be true. I think they are. And there's some corruption charges going. I mean, the president has had to step down, and I think there's some legal stuff. I mean, it would be like our president being impeached. And so yeah, there's some turmoil in South Korea, and Samsung's in the middle of all of it. And so it's on the surface here, we see those phones, but there's a lot of turmoil going on right now in South Korea around it. So pretty interesting. We're not going to, Edward, we are not going to test your bandwidth anymore. And we're going to say thank you for coming on and let you drop early. I'm actually going to wrap this up here pretty quick so that we can get your interview from Infotech on. But thanks for joining us. Always good to have you on. I'll remind folks to stay around after this interview, and we will play the interview that we did at Infotech. Not tonight live, but we'll do it on the recorded version. Edward, thanks for taking an hour and joining us tonight. I always enjoy it and always learn a ton. Thanks for being here. All right. Well, Edward, if you can hear me, you can go ahead and hang up at this point.
I think he's hearing a delay. He's hearing us a few seconds behind.
It might be. Hopefully he can. There he goes. Okay. Well, good. Well, we got at least an hour in with that. Yeah. Pretty cool, Mike. I love having him on. I learn something new every time.
No kidding. And it's so funny, the timing. Like, I swear, Jim, for some reason, like, you have a bug in my life, because there'll be topics that come up that are so relevant for like my today. Like, this stuff just started coming up in my job like in the past month. And so it's one of those where you're like, oh, wow, nice.
Yeah, cool. He's just a good guy. He's an Omaha guy. I mean, how often do do we get three all from Omaha on here? So he's an Omaha guy, and he's very, very cool. And I've just, you know what? We've been doing this such a long time now, 6 years, over 6 years. It's fun to get some of these repeat guests on where we have a long history, and we just kind of get to walk through that. So, every time I think about, like, well, work's really busy, and maybe I should stop podcasting Home Gadget Geeks and whatever. And then I have a great interview like this, and I'm like, oh man, I'm never going to stop. That's a ton of fun. So, well, we thank those of you out there in the live show. Edward, thanks again for jumping in here. Remember, stay around for a little bit of his. I'll put this in the post show for the live or on the recorded side. His interview there at Infotech really well. Just a couple reminders. One is, if you made it this far, you're one of our most engaged listeners. But two, we've gone completely commercial free on YouTube. I don't know if I've ever said that, but a couple months back, I shut off all monetization on YouTube. Mike, I don't know about you, but you know that YouTube recently changed their terms, and they're starting to wipe out a lot of the videos that are not monetization friendly, is what they're calling it. So many content providers who are making big money at YouTube all of a sudden are getting notified, this video of yours is not monetization friendly, and we're not going to allow monetization on it. And we have YouTube content creators who have gotten their Google ad, their money basically, right? Their ad money cut in half, and in some cases cut in a fourth of what they were normally making. And Google's just not being with YouTube, just not being very friendly to a lot of content creators. And so there's a lot of folks up in arms about that. Now, I didn't make this change because of that, but I months ago had thought, you know what, let's just go commercial free. So if you're ever going to watch a video, a Home Gadget Geek video, you shouldn't ever see a commercial. I've completely shut off commercials on YouTube. So if you head out if you do see it, let me know. But we have shut off. I've done my best to shut off the ads.
Yeah, and it's an interesting topic, right? It's one that gets a lot of people going, and I have actually some very interesting views on the whole ordeal. I think, don't be too mad. Don't just instantly jump and defend. I think that a lot of people naturally like, oh, Google's really shutting down these creators. When you think things through and you think about how the whole advertising model works, and companies wanting their ads in front of content that is at least a little bit relatable or something, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense what Google did, right? No, and especially for the companies paying for the ads.
Yeah, right on. Although I would say Google started a model in the beginning, anybody could monetize for anything, and I think a lot of content creators kind of built empires on top of that monetization. Now, there's a lot of jankety, trickety things going on out there that content creators were doing to get more monetization. And I don't know if it was completely honest all the time either, or in the best, like you said, in the best interest of advertisers. I just prefer, at this point, you don't have to see ads when you're on YouTube. I didn't make any money off them anyways, and I don't get enough YouTube videos where it would have mattered. So, for me, it's kind of like, hey, if you want to support the show, use our Patreon link that's out there, and $1 or $2 or $5 or whatever you want to give at this point. If you want to support us in some way, don't worry about the ads. we'll try to be as commercial free as possible. We've got, LastPass in here and Maple Grove Partners and some other things, but it's one of those things. I've shut those ads off. So if you don't need to worry about that. If you're watching a Home Gadget Geeks video out there, I've completely shut the ads off. Enjoy not having to click the ad off at the bottom when you go out there. And then, of course, don't forget, we're back on Amazon. So if you want to support the Average Guy Tech Scholarship Fund, if you want to do that, again, remember, we can buy, as that fund builds up, I can buy things for people. They can review them, whatever, those kinds of things. That link, best way to do that is go to theaverageguy.tv. Just click on the Amazon link, click through it. It's in the right-hand side toolbar. We appreciate that as well. And I did send an email out to everybody on the subscription list this weekend to say, hey, it's available for you. So maybe I thought of a good use of the couple hundred I have there on the emailing list. Don't forget, if you want to send me an email, you can contact me here, Jim at theaverageguy.tv. Of course, the theaverageguy.tv platform and web hosting, both powered, media and web hosting, powered by Maple Grove Partners. Get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people you know and you trust. In fact, I'm going to see Christian graduate here in 3 weeks. So I get a chance to be in D.C. for that weekend and get a chance to see him graduate. It wasn't that long ago he was going to school, and so he'll be graduating from the University of Maryland, and you can head out to maplegrovepartners.com if you're interested in doing that. Of course, don't forget, you can listen to Home Gadget Geeks on the Android iPhone app, available in both versions, recorded and live versions available for you, all in a single app. Search Home Gadget Geeks on the Play Store or iTunes App Store if you want to subscribe to the podcast, but we have that app available for you. Again, we'll thank LastPass. We talked about them a bunch tonight, so we'll thank LastPass for their sponsorship. We're live at 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern every week out at theaverageguy.tv live. Great chat room tonight. If you guys stay around for a little bit. Emily, good to see you out there. Emily, Mark, Kevin, Peter, Ken, other Jim. I saw Randy Cantrell out there a little bit earlier. We thank you guys for coming out tonight. And with that, we'll say goodnight, everybody. Jim Collison, we're live from Infotech 2017 here in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm here with Edward. Pronounce your
Weniger.
Weniger. Yes. I always want to say Weininger, and I know that's wrong. Weniger. So thank you for doing that. You've also been on my Home Gadget Geeks podcast as well. You're here talking about Bitcoin.
No.
Blockchain. Well, I put the two together. Is that a common misconception? They're related though, right?
They are related, yes.
Bitcoin and blockchain. Yes. Bitcoin is built on blockchain.
That is correct.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So, but you and I have talked about Bitcoin a couple times. In fact, you're coming back on Home Gadget Geeks here in a little bit to do that.
I think it is, yeah.
Everything you've said, by the way, in our podcast has been true.
Oh, hope so. Hope that continues. We'll see.
Yeah, the price keeps going up like it's supposed to, right?
You bought some, right?
I didn't.
You still did.
I can't believe I didn't buy any Bitcoin. Yeah. I think when you and I first started talking about Bitcoin, about 300, I think it was 324, 326,
around there, yeah.
11 something, 12 something right now.
Mid tens.
Four times? Oh, mid tens.
Yeah.
So 3 times. Let's just say 3 times what you and I talked about. That's not necessarily speculative growth, is it? That's kind of growth built into the way it's supposed to work?
Well, because of just the design, it's decentralized, it's pseudonymous or anonymous. It's hard to tell actually what or who is using the network, so it's kind of hard to gauge where that you look at the easiest and quickest and most obvious would be number of transactions, your number of wallets, and so when you start to dig into that, though, you realize, well, one particular person could have a whole lot of wallets. They could be doing a different, Coinbase, for instance, gives you a different wallet because the wallet addresses are essentially unlimited.
Yeah.
And so that's not, there's a lot of them. And so, so you can't tell who particularly is using it. You can only tell how many wallets or what wallets are using it. So, it's not necessarily all speculative. There's certainly, and Ethereum actually is, we'll be talking a little bit about that. That's what we are developing in right now. So Ethereum is similar to Bitcoin, but in that it uses a blockchain technology behind it. But Ethereum actually has run up from, zero a few years back to $40 some right now. And so that also would have been a very good investment. So
yeah. And that's really, really interesting, right? And we often hear the term ledger being used in the same, when we think of blockchain. Yep. Ledger is the same.
Sure.
So tell us, what are you hoping to What are you hoping to teach today in your session, which is at the same time as mine, I think?
3:15.
No, you're later in the afternoon. So okay.
So the idea is that when you talk about a ledger, that the ledger in when you start using blockchain is essentially its own entity, and then you control who has access to that ledger, and then they kind of gauge why or how, or in terms of what permissions they use, and then what they want to use that for. So the idea is that right now any company could open QuickBooks and get start doing their own accounting and stuff like that. But then the question becomes, if you want other folks to, we'll say, interact with your data or interact with your money, how do you control that, or how do you allow that publicly without with minimal risk from a security standpoint? And traditionally, that's hooks or API, that kind of thing, programmatically. With the blockchain, it's a lot easier and a lot safer in that it's essentially designed to be public, and so anything you kind of claw back from that is your level of security that you want to control and what you want to manage and handle. And so it's from a database where you're exposing, you don't want to expose anything except little pieces. Kind of blockchain's the reverse of that, essentially. So
yeah, we hear a lot about data breach, and a lot of banking has done. They've come a long way, but we still are banking the same way, we did, for hundreds of years. Can the blockchain fix our? I mean, can this fix some of the banking when we think of, especially internationally? Is it a better way? Is it the new way to do it that would be the future?
So the same thing with why we bank the way we bank is what I would say applies to why do we use databases? We've used databases because they've been around for 20 years. Somebody back when the web was starting decided, this is what this is the easiest way to structure data. And that's kind of the paradigm shift that we're facing or trying to challenge, I guess. And why are we doing it that way? And then what could this offer differently? And we're not trying to solve all the problems. We're not trying to solve the banking industry necessarily, but but there are use cases for it. There's companies that would be more prone to use it, or more likely to use it, or want to use it for their own reasons. And so we want to make sure that they know it's out there. I mean, you start to talk about international transactions and such. To your point, yes, it is easier, lower barrier of entry, and you could say faster as well, and more secure to send money overseas using blockchain technology. And not only that, but like we talked about earlier, that kind of when you start to talk about the public versus private side of things, a bank is probably almost always going to use a private blockchain, but it gives them the opportunity or the ability to quickly hop into a public blockchain and hop out of a public blockchain. And so so then they could go right to Ripple or right to Bitcoin to transfer that money, and then come right back all through using software instead of these forms that we currently use to wire money and such. So.
Yeah. Personal identity is a form of value in the sense, and today identity theft is a gigantic problem. Could blockchain be a solution to? I mean, it's a ledger of people, right? From that standpoint, could it work that way?
So the other side of what we're talking about is that these interests that we're talking about in terms of the blockchain industry and what it can benefit are almost antithetical to what the government is doing in terms of they want to know everything that's going on. They want to know everybody that's doing stuff. And so you start to what's possible versus what's realistic, or in a certain time frame what's likely. Those are all different answers to that question. Yes, with Ethereum's new Mist browser, you can create multiple identities, and each of those identities are tied to a private key. And so as long as you have that private key and that's not exposed or given away, that is who you are. And so you truly do have who I am, and this hacker is not, or this prince in Nigeria is not who I am. So
alleged prince.
And so there's a lot of big names in the industry, and I've tried to kind of stop name dropping because it gets kind of old, and everybody's like, whoever. Wells Fargo is really not going to ever do anything with the blockchain type thing, even though they have been or are involved in blockchain. Sure. So eventually those things will come to light. They'll release something that'll be, get a lot of publicity. But in the meantime, one of the companies I'm really fixated on right now is Brave. It's Brave Software, and Brandon Ike from JavaScript fame started a company, Brave. And so the idea is, one of the ideas is that this browser, it's a replacement for Chrome, IE, etc. The browser kind of allows you to have an identity within the browser, within your with these keys, with public-private keys. So that being said, you're able to choose who you want to know who you are, I guess. Similar to Mist. And so the idea is that you decide what ads you want to see, or you decide you can send money to people, and so you're storing money in your browser essentially, and you control that all via private keys. So to the extent that people are able to control and be responsible with their private keys, yes, you can control your identity on the web in a blockchain or environment cryptographically.
Yeah, it just seems like there's got to be the next generation of identity that's more secure, more controllable, can't be compromised as easy. Right. Seems like the old forms, you think of a social security number, that there can't be any probably worse example of a form of identity. That can easily, if it's in public.
Yep. Exactly.
And now they're all in public for the most part, right?
I mean, it's essentially, your new private key is your new social security number.
Yeah.
And you talk about the RSA hack, then you start to talk about centralized versus decentralized. Of why would I or can you trust decentralized ledgers or blockchains? And the alternative is something like an RSA, where they're just as likely to be hacked as anybody else, with the right engineering. So.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to say the least. I think these are, when we think about this technology, and maybe 5 or 6 years ago, a lot of people dismissed it in a lot of ways. Like, I hear it and see it popping up in more and more places, and I think it's probably here to stay. Talk a little bit about your local work here in Omaha. We'll pay the bills here real quick, so we know. How's the company? How's it going? What are you guys doing? That kind of stuff.
So Alpha BTC is we have one Bitcoin ATM at Jones Brothers.
Yeah, how's that going? I told I was over there the other day with my family, and I was like, hey, I know the guy who put this thing in.
Yeah, so we continue to, every month we are setting new records, or at least we've kind of reach a new plateau of, like, this is how busy we're going to be. There's people are constantly getting in and out of Bitcoin, so that's good. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning, we are currently looking for corporate partners to say, hey, I want to engage. I want to start learning about this stuff. How can we use it? And we have our own products, our own platform, but then certainly we're willing to or interested in kind of building something for them to use internally, and then just to get their hands dirty and go from there.
Yeah. At what point does Omaha get its second Bitcoin ATM?
I'd rather not. I'll not say right now, but
is that like secret?
That is what we are
competitive stuff.
That is what we are currently working on. No,
good.
Ask, but that is what we are currently working on. Yes.
Good. And then, what's it take to build a? I mean, what's physically inside a?
Yeah. So you have you have a hot wallet, which is basically for if the transactions were not done, if there was no hot wallet available, then the Bitcoin wouldn't be necessarily available immediately. And then you have to deal with like miners and transaction times and stuff like that, which is 10 minutes in the Bitcoin world is confirmation. And then you deal with how many confirmations do you trust. So the idea is that since everything should be instantaneous for the customer, we have essentially a computer, a receipt printer, the screen, obviously, and cash acceptor. It's fairly rudimentary. I think the size of the device is for security reasons more than anything. There's not a whole lot involved in it. It's just
So maybe the biggest part of it's probably the cash receptor.
In the cash receptor, yeah, that's true. Yeah, but they have tabletop units that you can buy that are about that tall.
Yeah,
and just hold.
Is that the most expensive part of it too? Thinking about the hardware, I mean, the software and the compute is probably pretty easy.
Right.
Screens are pretty cheap.
Yes, I believe the cash box is.
Interesting that the system that ties to the old system is probably still the most expensive part of the situation. Yep. So
but we, I mean, relatively speaking, in terms of what you would pay for a traditional ATM, like all the proprietary nature of it, the added work that has to be involved to integrate with a closed system that is more vulnerable to attack. The more the freer you are, you could drive costs down essentially, because there's not much you can do with the equipment in there, so.
Yeah, no, that's it's very, very cool what you're doing there. Again, every time I go into Jones Brothers, yep. I make sure is it still there. Yep. I walk by and I got an account set up.
Good. Just buy.
Just get in there and get that done. You had mentioned a couple times about browsers,
yes,
and some of the browser work. It sounds to me like, recently I've done a couple shows on. There's a Ghost browser that's kind of built on Chromium that is designed for software developers so they can switch in between. They can group accounts together because sometimes they need multiple profiles and stuff like that. It sounds like to me that the blockchain Bitcoin is driving some innovation in the browsers. Are those extension plugins? Do we need to kind of think about to make some of this work? Do we have to think differently about our browser as well?
So if there are plugins to use Chrome and whatnot to store your Bitcoin in the browser through an extension. CryptoKit is the one that comes to mind, or probably the biggest. And basically what you can do is when you're kind of like what Visa is doing with like v.me or stuff like that, like kind of the one-click experience of being able to, if you're on a page, it'll find a Bitcoin address, and when it comes time to send money, it'll basically auto-populate and say which account you want to send from.
It's not storing money. It's just storing the ability to put your keys in to make that money transaction happen, right?
Well, it depends because you're right. You could essentially tie to like a Coinbase account or something where they're storing your money, but at the same time, I mean, there's really no cost technologically in terms of just the bandwidth or whatever that stops you from keeping your money in the browser itself. So it just depends on how secure you feel, and how comfortable you feel with your private keys. So that's one thing. The other piece of that is not only, so once you start to do that and you are pushing your money out rather than having them withdraw the money from your bank account, the second piece of that or the second generation of that is where you start to deal with, could you pay website content providers based on how much time you spend on their website. So the other one of the features, I don't know if it's CryptoKit or not, but one of the features is exactly that, where it'll actually you'll subscribe to certain websites, and then depending on how much time you spend on that website every month, you will pay them. You'll essentially settle up at the end of the month, and you pay them. You send them $5 or whatever time you spend. And then with Mist and Mist, for instance, with Ethereum, then the browser becomes, I use the term browser. It's not necessarily like a Chrome. It's more like a regular app. It's kind of so the idea is that you're able to build smart contracts. So instead of what you would normally have to go into command line for, essentially lets you choose what are the terms of my engagement, who are the recipients or who are the parties, and then you craft this contract, you send it to them, they accept or reject the contract, and then things happen, triggers happen based on what you have set up in the code. So that's what Mist is.
Yeah, no, very cool. If people are interested, Edward, in talking more about this is the space that you're in. What's the best way for them to contact you?
Sure. So we're at alphabtc.com or Twitter or Facebook at alphabtc as well. So
yeah. And how's Omaha doing as far as a Bitcoin or blockchain friendly city, do you think?
There are the number of, from retail side, the number of merchants has not fluctuated greatly. I mean, we're probably closer to 30, if you will. So we have yet to get the Clover guys over there involved yet. That would really help.
Those are our friends at First Data across the hall.
And so, but in terms of the larger enterprise or corporate folks in the area, I'm continually hearing about people that are doing it and not not publicly. And so there is actually a lot of interest. There are experiments in the space, I'll say, or development in progress, but it's under the radar. So.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a perfect place to be under the radar today in the sense that you don't have to do it, but I think there are some key organizations that probably want to think about at least having a team or having an implementation that's been tested.
Yep.
I think there's great space for innovation. We don't always know what they are when you're dealing with people's money in this standpoint or whatever it happens to be, their identity or whatever you decide to put in the ledger.
Yep.
That's a different way of doing things, but I think some of the organizations who are thinking about it behind the scenes are absolutely doing the right thing, getting ready for what could be. It just takes one thing to topple over, and all of a sudden everybody starts flowing that way. You think about the chip on our cards here in the United States that held out for the longest time, and then I think maybe when the government said you're all going to switch. Maybe that's a bad example.
Yep. And that's, with the new administration, there is, I'll touch on this in my talk, but, there is, I think people are nervous or scared about it because, it came from Bitcoin, and so that's kind of, people think that is kind of shadowy. It's not, but, as the government is talking about it more and with, potentially loosening regulations around fintech and around the space. And so hopefully that will also help or drive folks to be more aggressive in that.
Yeah, well, people fear what they don't fundamentally understand sometimes. And I think it's definitely getting more and more common as we talk about it more. I appreciate you coming on to Home Gadget Geeks and talking about it. We'll have you back on, but also coming out here it's great to have a representative of it in the city of Omaha who sees it for what it is, not scared to kind of go out on a limb. I think there's still some folks who are like, but I think it's here to stay, and there's some great things we'll do with it here in the future. So Edward, thanks for taking a few minutes to meet with me.